Alan Bulmer, how are you? It's nice to catch up with you.
Great, how are you, Nick? It's been a while.
It has been a while. So maybe we can start just by giving a little bit of an overview of who you are, how your career developed, who Hawkins Watts is, what you all do down there in New Zealand.
I should perhaps mention at the outset that my business career has been in New Zealand, so there are obviously cultural differences with the USA. However, having said that, there is a Māori proverb in New Zealand which can be loosely translated as, what is the most important thing in the world? It is people, it is people, it is people. This certainly resonates with me, and as it is the basis of effective leadership. I'm working for a company called Hawkins Watts. Hawkins Watts is a food ingredients and research business in New Zealand, and I've been there for about 25 years. At the moment, my title is General Manager, Technical and Strategy, and I look after the R&D group, and I have fingers in sales, managing principals, marketing, all sorts of things.
Alan, I appreciate that intro and the emphasis on people. That resonates with me. What are the things that you've observed or done in your career to really capture that motto that you described for us?
I think if you look at how I got into being a manager or a leader from the start, I once got told that some people chase responsibility whereas others simply have it thrust upon them. I'm definitely in the latter group. I didn't have a career path, I just took the opportunities that I was given. And in my career I've pivoted from technical management to operations management to sales and marketing management pretty seamlessly. Adversity inevitably caused each of those pivots, and one of the things is successfully handling that is the key to the growth.
So it was really adversity that caused each of these pivots, adversity in your career, or what was going on there?
I'll run you through it if you like. My first degree was in food technology, so as you'd expect, the early part of my career focused on technical roles, starting off in quality control and then moving up through the ranks in R&D to become a technical manager. I was a technical manager at a large New Zealand multinational food company, and I had about 20 staff. So that was a pretty seamless move through technical. As it was promoted, I realised quite quickly that it was incredibly satisfying to build teams to achieve common goals, and developing trust and a shared vision with the staff was the key to success. Just when I was really comfortable in the technical manager role, fate intervened. My manager, who was the operations director, left the business, and I was immediately asked by the managing director to take over the biggest part of his role, namely managing the manufacturing operation. So this meant that I had to give up the thing that I was really passionate about in my technical manager role and pick up responsibility for production, engineering and warehousing. So there was 180 staff in a multinational business that had just moved into 24/7 production. I'd worked with all of the people that would be my direct reports and had their respect, and I figured I had the skills that I needed for the role, so I accepted the promotion, thinking how hard could it be. But the production and engineering staff were highly unionised. It was necessary to immediately renegotiate their collective contracts. On top of this, the business had bought two competitors and wanted to move their operations onto our site within 18 months. It was a grueling introduction to operations management, but it taught me a heap of skills. How to negotiate with the unions to get win-win outcomes, build teams to manage major capital works, empowering staff to massively improve productivity. Fundamental to all of that was fostering the teamwork and building the trust, which is the people part. Looking back, we achieved some pretty special things. For example, increasing the line speeds on the biggest part of the operation sixfold and installing the largest cooling tunnel ever made in New Zealand. Just when I was becoming comfortable with operations, the business was restructured and my operations role was disestablished. 6 middle senior managers were culled simultaneously as part of a cost reduction exercise driven from overseas. I was faced with a real dilemma: stay in my comfort zone and get a job somewhere else in technical and operations, or do something else. So this is the adversity cutting in. I had a young family at the time, had to find a job, and earlier in my career I'd got a second qualification in marketing, so I had an option. So long story short, I pivoted into sales and marketing, taking on a role with the multinational buyer, or Bayer, managing a food ingredients sales business. My thinking at the time was that I'd be ideally placed to get into general management in the long term with a hands-on understanding of sales and marketing. The job brief was to build an integrated food ingredients business that sold ingredients from within Bayer and outside of Bayer. This involved identifying and negotiating distribution agreements with recognised multinational ingredients manufacturers. I figured I knew a lot about ingredients from using them, and just had to develop a strategic plan, identify some targets, form the relationships and execute. Having Bayer as the underpinning organisation also helped, and some people listening may have heard of some of the agencies we picked up: FMC Biopolymer, Tate and Lyle, Cyanotech. Forming relationships was one thing, but building a sales organisation with the technical smarts to sell highly functional food ingredients was very important. Without this, we'd never have been able to deliver on the promises and grow the New Zealand business for all of our partners. At the end of 7 years, the food ingredients business was 3 times bigger than when I joined Bayer, and growing strongly. And it's this business that was transferred to Hawkins in 2001, and I've been there ever since. So I guess the key to all of this is I've been incredibly lucky in my career to have managers who were highly skilled and were kind enough to share knowledge unselfishly and mentor me through my career. I've based my leadership style on the best things these managers taught me.
Alan, having that diverse background, going from technical to manufacturing and then into sales, right? So what you learned in technical, then you see it applied in the manufacturing. And then what you learned in those two things allowed you in your sales role to sell and promote a very highly technical product. Could you have been successful in sales without the previous experience in technical and manufacturing?
I don't think so, Nick. I think one of the things that was quite unique about what Hawkins does, and what in my career anyway, is that to sell ingredients into the food industry, you really have to understand the food manufacturing process and the things that go on in food businesses. And if you understand how they formulate, and you know how things are made, and the processing lines and the kit that's used, and then how they go to market, it's really easy to pitch your ingredient offerings to solve their problems.
I always remember a story. You and I worked together. You were one of our supply partners in the region when I was at the chemical company. And I think collectively we got this harebrained idea to bring one of our R&D folks on the trip with me. And I remember bringing him along to all the customer visits, and he was literally solving problems in conversations with folks that they had for months or years or forever. Do you remember that?
Absolutely, and that's one of the main advantages of bringing in technical experts from overseas principals. And we always would learn from that visit and then be able to apply the similar principles to other visits after the principal's gone.
Yeah, it was a successful relationship between our companies, and I want to get more into that, but just want to go back to one of the very, very first things you said about the cultural differences between New Zealand and the United States. So I'm just curious what those differences are in your mind.
Oh, I think In New Zealand, the rules around how people are managed in businesses and the things that you can and can't do as a manager are quite tightly prescribed. And that kind of makes you more aware of how you have to deal with people and treat them respect. And so that underpins everything you do. And when you're building teams and you're hiring people, there are processes that you go through to get them to be the best that they can be. And so there's almost a tacit implication that you are going to grow them, and if things don't work, then both of you have to work it out, because sacking people just because their views are different or their perspectives are changed, it's not possible. And we just don't even think about terminating business relationships with staff in New Zealand. It's all about working together.
That's fascinating, actually. I guess I didn't appreciate that. So there's these employment rules that make it difficult or undesirable to terminate employee relationships. And is it that rule that then has driven this culture of really wanting to work with people and work through their careers, or is there layers to this, like regulatory?
No, I don't think that it's driven it. I think that it's made people realise that if you're hiring staff, then you have an obligation to make the relationship work. And it's a two-way street, not just a manager telling someone what to do. And so everyone's aware of it. We work our way around it, and we have very stable, when you look at Hawkins, for example, we have a very stable workforce. A lot of people have been with the business for 15, 20 years. That underpins everything we do, because when you have that longevity and that commitment, it's all about building the people and making them become the best they can be.
Alan, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, because I wonder if this is the core of the feeling I always got visiting, not only with you all, but visiting New Zealand in general. Because if you would ask me what is the cultural difference between the companies, I would have just simply said people are nicer in New Zealand. But I wonder if what you're describing is the core of what I felt over there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people come to New Zealand and think that we're a very friendly race, but in relation to business though, it's not very confrontational. Even in the business we have, we deal with our competitors. Some of them are our biggest customers, and it's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about helping each other achieve the best result that we can for the country.
Is that because of the isolation, just the natural geographic isolation? Everybody feels they're on the same ship?
Absolutely. It's probably the most remote place to get to on the planet, and there is a real collective sense of New Zealanders helping New Zealanders.
Yeah. One of the questions I was going to ask later in the conversation, but I think it fits, is I always talked about Hawkins Watts as our premier partner. So if I had to rank all of our partners, who's the best? And it was always you all. Just the most professional, the most, as you say, just non-confrontational, easy to work with, very knowledgeable. Can you expand more on that? What makes you all so different than a lot of other partners that we have around the world?
God, I guess that comes largely from Peter Hawkins' vision at the start in terms of what he wanted to create. And we've been very careful in the staff that we've hired over time. So we've tried to get the best people that we could that fitted into the culture of the organisation and were technically competent. Once you get in that framework and you create a learning organisation and you build internal expertise and everyone's pulling on the same oar, then it's very easy to have a philosophy that goes out to the world and everyone sees it, and it's easy to deal with suppliers and customers. It's just not about confrontation. Is a waste of everyone's energy. You have to find negotiated solutions.
It's a global business. How did you all deal with perhaps some companies, countries have a more confrontational nature about them? How did you all deal with those types of folks?
You just are mindful of that and you treat them with respect. You don't try to get their back up.
Even when they are perhaps pushing you a little bit?
I think then you just have to explain where you sit and what the view is through your lens and what things are like in New Zealand and how interconnected everything is. And if you can explain to them why you're doing the things you are and you can demonstrate that you have been working hard from them, then conflict doesn't tend to manifest itself very often.
Some of the comments that you were just making about the culture at Hawkins Watts and training people, educating them, I know that you personally were very intentional about mentoring some of the folks as they came there and were perhaps earlier in their career, and you had a fairly formal program around this.
Yeah, I've got quite a structured way of doing that. So I'll explain if you like. To me, it's all about building strong connections with my staff. So when they first join, I really spend quite a lot of time trying to get to know them, how they think. And I guess from my perspective, my job is to help them become the best they can be. So to do that, I have to create a learning organisation where everyone feeds off each other. And there are basically 3 steps to training a technologist in an R&D environment. There's the learner part, there's an apprentice, and there's the expert. And the learner needs to be taught everything. But as they go along, you give them more tasks to do and you give them a little bit more room to make mistakes. And once they've manufactured the basic tasks, they move on to become an apprentice. And that's when you start to encourage them to push the boundaries. And it's only when they've pushed those boundaries that they start to go on that path to becoming an expert, because expertise is all based about broadening your skill and knowledge base, preferably by doing. I'll give an example. Like yesterday, one of the apprentices in our business sat down with the technical team and ran through some fairly structured experiments that she had done on a particular application. And it was very comprehensive. She'd drawn pictures, explained how it all went together, and we all listened and learned from her. And I think that's really important, that people that are coming through get a chance to show that they are building their core skills and sharing their knowledge, just like those that have been there a long time share their knowledge with them. And in many ways, it's like bringing up your kids. When your children are first born, they're incredibly reliant on you. But as time goes on, you're trying to build independence, and you want them to become their own unique individual person. And it's no different in a business. You're trying to make all of these people become the best they can be.
Is this what you spend the majority of your time on these days?
Yeah, a little bit. I also have other things that I do, but just keeping a loose hand on what's going on and asking questions and helping people when they get stuck. That's some of what I do, yeah. The other thing I should mention, which is just a bit of another personal thing of mine, is I think for people to grow, they have to experience fear. Because everyone gets in a comfort zone, and to get out of that comfort zone, you really have to go through fear to get personal growth. So if you can imagine, there's 3 concentric circles. The inner circle is your comfort zone, the circle outside of that is fear, and the outer circle is personal growth. So they have to do things that really challenge them in order to grow. And I do this by demonstrating. So a couple of years ago, I agreed to appear live on a talkback program on national radio in New Zealand to answer questions sent in from listeners. Hundreds of thousands of people listening to a program. Now, I had no idea what questions they were going to ask, and I had to call on all of my experience as a food technologist, balance my responsibilities to my employer with my code of ethics to answer the questions without really sharing my personal views. And it was mayhem, and it was incredibly satisfying professionally to actually get through it, but I was very nervous going into it. And the question is, would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Did it grow me as a person? Absolutely.
How do you walk the people that you are leading through this process to face that fear? Demonstrating it is a great way to do it, but people can still be very resistant even if they see somebody else succeed.
Yeah, we would just, in the case of the technologists, is if we have an idea, then they just emboldened to do it. They know that we're there to help them, and they're not on it on their own, but we encourage them to have a go. And most of the time, because we're careful when we're recruiting, they jump at the chance.
On the recruiting side, how are you screening for these characteristics that you want to have become part of your company?
If you go through a recruitment process with a technologist, you will know when they come in and you have the discussions what sort of people they are. And you don't want to get a team full of people that are the same. But you do want to get people who have done things that are already quite challenging and knock them off. So we've got people who have represented their country in sport or come to New Zealand as a young child on their own to be educated here. Those things set their characters. And a lot of that is how we work. We're trying to find people that have a unique skill set and that we can work with.
I hear what you're saying and definitely agree. People with adversity in their background demonstrate something a little bit different. But I think you're also being a little modest because weeding out and finding the great people to bring onto your company is probably one of the hardest things there is to do.
Hawkins has got an interesting sort of strategy in relation to hiring new technical people and new salespeople, in that their immediate line managers would do the initial assessments and they'll create the shortlist. And then the people, when they come in for their second interview, are put in an environment where there are a lot more people there and they're often given challenges to complete. So our technologists get assigned a task and they have a whole lot of things that they have to do, and they're probably going to spend 2 or 3 hours at Hawkins creating things. And at the end of that, they will have to present that to the sales team, and we'll help them through the process if they don't understand what ingredients to use and that sort of stuff. But the end result and where they go is the essence of them. They decide what product they're going to make. We give them 3 or 4 options, they choose which one, and they have to get the texture, the flavour, the colour, everything. And you might think that's quite tough, but when it's just like me being on radio, when you wrap around them and help them through it, it's such a rush for them to get to the end and have it assessed and get positive feedback that they just love the idea of working for us.
So is this kind of a unique part of your all's hiring process, or is this kind of hands-on trial by fire interview more prevalent in New Zealand?
No, this is us. It's definitely not what other people would do. It's just the element, it's one of the essences of us. We want to see how they'd work in a team, but also how they work under pressure and with the freedom to create.
It's very interesting, Alan. That's a lot of things I did not know, but was experiencing kind of the results of all of that insight.
Yeah, and a lot of this has been developed over time by the people that are within the business. They've been there a long time, and so they have figured out a way of getting good people. And yeah, you're right, we probably do undervalue the process.
I think you do, or maybe I need to have you come here and help us with our process. So tell me, Alan, I know what you spend some of your free time doing, but tell me about fishing in New Zealand.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a tragic, to be honest. I'm currently working 4 days a week, which gives me 3 days to fish. I have my own website where I write highly technical articles on fishing. And yeah, I go through journeys where I'm spin fishing or fly fishing, depending on what floats my boat. But yeah, the fishing in New Zealand's fantastic. And I'd fish in the bathtub if I thought there was something there.
So what do you target in New Zealand?
If I'm fishing in the sea around Auckland, I'd be targeting trevally, snapper, kahawai, which the Australians call Australian salmon, kingfish, all sorts of things. Really anything that's got fins and can move at speed.
And is this entirely for sport, or are these fish that you would also consume?
No, I'm generally catch and release. So probably only keep, 5% of what I catch. And that would be largely if something had happened to it, like it was deeply hooked or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, what are the regulations like in New Zealand? Does everybody need, say, countrywide fishing license, or is it regional?
If you're fishing in salt water, then you don't need a license. There are rules about what you can catch, but not a lot of rules about what you can use. In the freshwater, it's completely different. So there's a national license, but there are zones within New Zealand that you'll need a special license for, over and above that. And what you can and can't use is quite tightly prescribed.
Based on what species you're targeting?
Yeah, mostly trout would be the freshwater fish. Yeah. And everyone's heard about the size of trout in New Zealand and how many there are and all that sort of stuff.
Are trout native to New Zealand?
No.
No. Yeah.
The rainbow trout originally came from, I think, the Russian River in America. And brown trout, I think, came here from Tasmania via the UK.
And you keep pretty good statistics on your fishing outings, right?
Alan's an anagram of anal. So, yeah, that will be true.
Yeah. Remind me your website.
It's www.activeanglingnz.com. That's one word.
You have videos. I remember you were messing around with drones a few years ago.
Yeah, early on I went through the video phase. But videos really takes away from the pleasure of fishing, and that you have to have something on your chest or someone's got a drone whizzing above your head. And while the footage that you get can be quite special, it's not really why I go fishing. It's all about getting out there and somewhere that's beautiful and quiet and communing with nature, really. Not about making content to drag other people there. And remarkably, people don't really engage as readily with a video as they do with a written article. I don't find anyway on the website. The videos have been quite poorly patronised, where the technical articles are read all the way around the world.
Not that you ever will retire, but if you do one day, is this going to become your full-time lifestyle, fishing every day?
Now, I got a couple of things I want to do, to be honest. I was fortunate enough last year to be made an adjunct professor in food technology at Massey University, and I'm really quite keen on doing more with the university as time goes on and actually giving something back, because I think I could help students transition seamlessly from university into the workforce and build their skills before they start. It would be a really useful thing for the country. So it's really, for me, it's about time to give back. So fishing will obviously be a part of it, but I'm looking at other things as well, just to keep me employed. Yeah, it's a wee way away yet.
Alan, I wanted to speak with you because we've known each other and catch up after a couple years of not talking as frequently. So I didn't really have any preconceptions of what we might cover, but what you described is pleasantly educational to me. There's so many insights that I didn't have from all the years of working together. So I really appreciate that, enjoy that, particularly the people first approach.
And to be honest, Nick, we really enjoyed working with you. And I think one of the things why it worked so well is because you got it. You engaged with us on our terms and allowed us to show you how we worked. And that's a really important thing, because if like I said at the start, what's the most important thing in the world is people as people. When you can find people who understand you, especially when you're living in a remote country like New Zealand, and you can build those relationships, sharing how we do things, then they're incredibly powerful. And you achieve great things as a consequence when both parties are operating as equals and sharing knowledge seamlessly.
I completely agree with you, and it was always the highlight of my time to be able to come spend a visit with you all. Everybody was unbelievably nice and gracious to me, even when I was very early in that role and probably didn't know anything. It was really great working with you all. Peter especially was always gracious, extending hospitality. So, please tell everyone hello and thanks again for everything that they did for me at that time in my career.
Oh no, they still talk about you, Nick, that we thoroughly enjoyed having you in New Zealand, and it's just a pleasure. And thank you so much for all you did and the roles that you had and when you were interacting with us.
Alan, I thank you again for your time. I think folks will really enjoy this, and I look forward to putting it out there for folks.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.